Chapter 12. Today, I didn't know what this was. Today, I looked at those pages and forgot why it was here. What this object was supposed to be. It confused me. I had to dig deep into my mind. The five senses. Touch. Rough edges of pages. Smell. Ink and paper. Taste. Not tasty at all. Sound. Hollow quiet. Sight. Words on pages. Words on pages. Buddy. Dot. Ma. Grandpa. Joey Drew. My story. This isn't just my story. It's your story too, Dot. I wish I could tell it from your point of view sometimes. I wish I knew why you believed me and sought me out that first time. I wish the answer was more than just your gut. I wish I understood you the way you seemed to understand me. Maybe it was all a lie. But you were never a liar. That was the whole thing, wasn't it? You chose not to lie. People can make that choice. I wish I knew why. No, it's it. You believed me when I told you about the infirmary, about the creature in the darkness, about my shirt. I'd been stupid not to bring it into work the next day with me, but it hadn't mattered because you believed me. It wasn't just some dark fairy tale. It was real. You came with me to the infirmary hallway. No, it's at lunch. I showed you the room. There was nothing there, of course, but that didn't make you not. No, if you believe me. It just made you want to investigate more. You, Dot, always asked questions. She really did. In case this is someone else, in case this isn't her reading this, she was great at asking questions. What about Sammy and Tom? She asked, quickly pocketing her master key after I handed it back to her. She didn't seem to mind at all I'd taken it, but maybe it was because she was so interested in what I found. What about them? What about that conversation you overheard? About ink? I shook my head. I wasn't sure what to think. Come on, buddy. These guys are being secretive about ink in this, it's the odd way. And then you end up with the ink-stained handprint on your back. Might be no connection, but does it really feel like there isn't? I don't think so. True. There was something I hadn't told her, but it made me sort of uncomfortable. I didn't totally trust what I'd seen, and I hated jumping to conclusions, looking stupid. But if anyone will listen to me, it would be Dot. So I told her about the conversation, about going to Sammy and seeing the ink bottle beside him and the black smudge at the corner of his mouth. Like he'd had his pen in his mouth, she asked. I felt now even more conflicted saying this bit. Maybe, but I feel like I remembered that the bottle had more ink in it. Let's see. And then it had less ink in it when I looked again. I didn't want to say it outright. I'd worry she'd look at me funny, but instead she immediately asked, Do you think he drank it? That'd be toxic, wouldn't it? She asked the question I hadn't dared to ask myself. I don't know. Where's the place to start? First Sammy, then that Tom person. I nodded. One thing at a time, she said. I nodded again. At the end of the day, Dot and I decided to go to the music department to take a look around. It was the first time, I'd felt truly on board, with one of her plans. Mainly because it was the plan we made together. At that point, I could have pretended nothing had happened. So many others at the studio did. But if they knew anything strange was happening at all. But I couldn't. Part of it was definitely wanting to impress Mr. Drew and let him know something was going on in his studio. But part of it was my own curiosity. My own need. There was also something about my friendship with Dot. Watching her interact with people, all the blunt questions she asked, it made me wonder why people didn't talk like that more. Why people weren't so direct all the time. Dot had made me start asking questions, and now I wanted to know the answers. So there I was, back in the music department. Dot glanced at me as we passed the hall to the stairs for the infirmary. like we had a secret, which we did. I tried to return the look with a similar one, but I just kind of frowned. I couldn't do it. There was something that would always make me feel uncomfortable about the music department. The hallway seemed unnecessarily dark and empty. The musicians weren't there all the time recording, so the large space needed for them once a month just seemed creepy and hollow the rest of the time. Also, I could never shake that first meeting with Sammy from my mind. If you could call it a meeting, his body drenched in ink, riding around, on the ground like that. Ink in his ears, in his mouth, in his eyes. You okay, Bunny? Dot asked as we walked into the large room. The stage was littered with instruments, like always, but now for some reason the sight disturbed me more. It gave me the impression that the musicians had been there and then suddenly just vanished. Out of nowhere. Into nowhere. Yeah, I tried to give her a reassuring smile, and then remembered I was terrible at giving people reassuring smiles. What do you think we're looking for? I don't know. She wandered over to the desk against the far wall. I never seen Sammy sit here, I realized, as she started to open drawers and look through paper. I'd only ever seen him by his music stand at the edge of the platform. There isn't much in here, she said. Maybe in the supply closet? Dot stood upright and closed the drawer and nodded. Good point. You want to look while I finish up here? She asked, hands on hips. I remember trying to clear up that ink. I remember Sammy yelling at me. I remember the hot, wet breathing on my face from last night. No, I said. Dot looked at me for a moment, then said, Okay, I'll do it. You see if there's anything else that looks suspicious here. As she marched off in her purposeful way back out into the hall. I stood there admiring her bravery. Then I realized. Dot, she poked her head around the corner. Yes. Do you want me to? Going alone. I couldn't even, get the offer to come, protect her out. Because already the expression on her face made me feel silly. Of course she'd be okay. She was always okay. She shook her head aside, and then disappeared once again. It was when I turned and looked around that I remembered that being alone in the music room didn't make me feel particularly good either. I carefully stepped up onto the stage and maneuvered around the instruments, glancing into their cases, trying to see if anything looked out of place. But I wasn't a musician. How on earth was I supposed to know what was normal and what wasn't? All I could tell was what looked creepy and what didn't. And while the stage boards creaked under me, and my footsteps echoed in a way that made it seem like someone was in the room with me, walking at the exact same speed, nothing looked strange. It's just, everything felt strange. I eventually made it round into Sammy's conductor stand. I thought maybe he had a little thing of ink off to the side, or anything, maybe even a spill, but all he had were his music notes. I knew it, that's why, they were... See, because he had scrawled music notes on the front of the book. It was hard enough to see. Black ink, on a black cover. I tilted the stand a little more upright, and the ink glinted in it, which intrigued me, because usually the ink wasn't glossy like that. Maybe it was still wet. I touched the end of the M very carefully. I was so tired of being covered in ink. From Sammy, from the handprint. I didn't need more of it, especially not as I was wearing one of my grandfather's shirts now, having totally run out of my own. Dry. I tilted the stand even more, but slowly just to see. I noticed something in the bottom corner. I picked up the book and looked closer. I was feeling bold now. It looked like a pair of Bendy's horns, like the top part of Bendy's head without the circle. It was so hard to tell. The drawing of them glinted, it disappeared in the light, and looked like it had almost slipped off the cover. I couldn't help myself. I had to see more, so I opened the book. Inside were rows of lines of music notes running across them. The title, Bendy and the Pirates, ran across the top. That's what Richie was working on upstairs. Let's see, there was something unusual except seeing the music like that. I'd never seen a score before. It was interesting, but not strange. I flipped a page. Now it read Alice's song. Another, The Butcher Gang Jig. And another, Nightlife Boris. I'd forgotten I was even looking for anything in general until I flipped the page again and almost dropped the book. The staggering difference between the regular music and this was like a punch to the gut. So shocking. It was, if I was to put it in a nice way, doodles. But it was so much more than that. It's more like deep scratch marks. With the hastily drawn, with the images of ink splatters as smudging. And it came across like whoever had done them was a maniac. Like he was rushing like crazy. Had to get the images onto paper before something happened. I understood that feeling. I didn't understand what I was looking at. In the center of the pages was a large, sketchy symbol I'd never seen before. A circle with a piece cut out, and a bunch of lines framing it, with another circle around all that. Sammy had drawn over it so many times that the paper was torn near the middle. The ink glistened like the ink on the cover, but it was similarly dry. That's not what chilled me to the bone, though. Taking up the full right-hand page, was what I could only describe as a drawing of a deformed Bendy. But it had very little in common with the cute cartoon character. Its limbs were long, almost praying mantis-like, with hands that had claws on them, not cute white gloves. Worse still was his face, half obscured with... What was it? Was it blood? The drawing was in black and white. It was hard to tell what everything was. All I could see, was how much longer his devil horns now were. How his smile was filled with sharp teeth. His eyes completely hidden behind a dripping black ooze. Blood? No. Ink? The pages were full up of other sketches, things I couldn't quite recognize. And words, too. Dreams come true. Like on the Bendy poster. And also, set us free. That one I didn't remember seeing before. More symbols. And everything that seemed to be slipping off the page. Like Sammy had been drawing it while being pulled away from it. Like the images were also falling away. I looked down. The illusion of things stripping off the page was so intense, I couldn't help myself. I stared at the ground for a good long moment. Nothing, of course, nothing. Just a worn wooden floor as it covered in scratches.